into the fold.
Senator Hume.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. I rise today to speak on a private senator's bill submitted for consideration to this place by our colleague from South Australia, Senator Farrell, the High Speed Rail Planning Authority Bill of 2017. And indeed, this is not an issue with which this chamber is unfamiliar. On this very issue, indeed, the member for Bennelong, Mr John Alexander, said in the other place on the 23rd of November 2015 that we have bipartisan support here, something Senator Ketter might have forgotten. We have bipartisan support here, but we might have a little bit of divergence as to how we should get there. And sadly, as with so many things lately, it appears that since the member for Bennelong last spoke on this issue in 2015, the Labor Party and the Coalition have in fact diverged a little further on our paths on how to deal with this highly complex issue. Firstly, Madam Deputy President, it should be noted that in principle, the Coalition supports the construction of high-speed rail connecting Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. And we often look to high-speed rail as simply a way of getting from A to B. But, as the member for Bennelong so eloquently noted in his speech back in 2015, that the positive externalities of high-speed rail extend far beyond simply making it easy to travel quickly from one major city to another. It is actually able to address one of our nation's core problems, and that is the overdevelopment of our major cities, the costs of those cities, the congestion of those cities, the loss of productivity from that congestion in those cities. And furthermore, we have an extraordinary imbalance whereby Sydney and Melbourne are among the 5 most expensive cities in the world. Now, this is an extraordinary thing for Australia, whose single greatest asset is real estate. The imbalance that has occurred as regional areas have declined and our major cities have grown presents a perfect storm for the creation of a strategic decentralisation to create housing supply in regions where land is less expensive. And the infrastructure to achieve that is high-speed rail. And this was discovered in Japan in the 1960s, as we well know, when Tokyo was the most expensive city in the world and amongst one of the most congested cities in the world. High-speed rail has seen Japan decentralise and the creation of regional cities and that have then taken the pressure off Tokyo. Now, there is no question, Madam Deputy President, that in a vacuum, high-speed rail presents many great opportunities for urban development and decentralisation of Australia's population away from our 2 major cities of Sydney and Melbourne. But alas, Madam Deputy President, we don't live in a vacuum. High-speed rail connecting Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne has previously been investigated and found to be unaffordable. And that is why the Turnbull government is focusing on finding ways to affordably deliver the benefits of high-speed rail through other means. This entails connecting regional centres to capital city CBDs with faster rail services, enticing people to move away from the city centres and comfortable in the knowledge that they can still access city centres quickly and easily. Mr Deputy President, this will generate jobs and provide opportunities for more people to access more affordable housing in regional areas and high-skilled jobs in the cities. Acting Deputy President, the federal opposition is committed to establishing a high-speed rail planning authority to gather international expressions of interest for the construction of high-speed rail. Now, on a number of previous occasions, we have seen the introduction of a private member's bill, such as this, in the other place, a private member's bill in the other place, to establish these very arrangements. And unsurprisingly, the debate on those bills has been adjourned. An almost identical bill was introduced to the Senate on the 4th of September 2017. Acting Deputy President, when last in government, Labor committed $55 million to establishing the authority. However, in true Labor style, the funding that was supposedly allocated to this authority in the 2013 campaign never really existed. As has been the case for decades, unfunded promises are a staple of the Australian Labor Party diet. The Parliamentary Budget Office classified this funding as an election commitment, rather than a commitment that was funded in the budget or in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook. As per the Parliamentary Budget Office said, the ALP election commitment, establish a high-speed rail authority, could result in significant budget impacts beyond the forward estimates. So this would depend on the final specification of any policy to construct high-speed rail on the east coast of Australia. By contrast, Acting Deputy President, the Turnbull Coalition Government is making real promises that are fully accounted for and fully funded and will be realised to the great benefit of the majority of people of Australia. The Turnbull Government will in fact provide $20 million in matching funding to support the development of up to 3 separate business cases that will explore opportunities for faster passenger rail and investigate improvements to the rail connections between Australia's cities and the surrounding regional areas. Now, following a competitive assessment process in line with the criteria published in the Faster Rail Prospectus, on March 9, 2018, the government announced the 3 successful proponents to develop the business cases as follows: the Consolidated Land and Rail Australia, CLARA, for Melbourne to Greater Shepparton, the New South Wales Government to assess Sydney to Newcastle, and the North Coast Connect Consortium to establish the business case into Brisbane and the regions of Moreton Bay and Sunshine Coast. Now, these proposals are demonstrative of the government's willingness to investigate long-term solutions that support urban, regional and rural development. And let me tell you, Acting Deputy President, that there is no shortage of commitment from this government to deliver rail-based solutions to urban planning and connectivity problems in Australia, particularly those on the eastern seaboard. The CLARA proposal, in particular, plans to makes the business case for high-speed rail from Melbourne to Shepparton. That would be the first step in the Melbourne-Brisbane high-speed rail corridor. The CLARA proposal provides an innovative and revolutionary model for building high-speed rail between Melbourne and Greater Shepparton that does not involve direct costs to government or to taxpayers. The Melbourne to Greater Shepparton business case will investigate the development of 2 new sustainable smart cities with connections to high-speed rail along a new dedicated corridor. And CLARA defines their cities as new cities where data is open, energy is renewable, water is valued, homes are affordable and people can live within 10 minutes of all that they need. Cities where world-class healthcare meets high-tech education, where new and existing businesses will converge to create more vibrant regional economies. Cities built to unlock all human potential. Cities made possible by high-speed rail that can place citizens in our capitals in less time than a morning commute. Acting Deputy President, the opportunity created by the development of these 2 smart cities would fund the infrastructure, including the fast rail line, needed to support them through land value uplift. And CLARA has indicated that travel times over the full length of the line could be reduced from approximately 3 hours to a mere 32 minutes. And while the CLARA proposal is clearly revolutionary, it does warrant further investigation, as it potentially provides both a solution to the challenges of meeting growing housing demand in our major cities and future growth opportunities. Our support for CLARA is a tangible way in which the Coalition are working with the private sector to better understand how the very high-speed rail between Melbourne and Brisbane could be built. Now, I do wish to further remind the Chamber of the great work that the Coalition parties are doing both on a federal and state level to bring high-quality and efficient rail to the great state of Victoria in other areas as well. Acting Deputy President, the Coalition is the only party who is delivering on the rail promises for the whole of Australia and not just those in metropolitan Melbourne. And I'm very proud to stand here today as the patron senator for all of Victoria, and in particular one of my regions of particular interest is that of Indi. I'm very proud because the Turnbull government has stopped the chatter about trains and is actually getting on with the job of not only upgrading but building new rail for Victoria and all of Australia. In the 2017-18 budget, the Turnbull Coalition committed $100 million to upgrade the North East rail line. No more speed restrictions, no more late trains and no more dangerous mud holes. It was the Turnbull Coalition government taking the first steps to upgrade the line that the North East, and particularly Indi, those communities of Wodonga and Wangaratta, so desperately need. Deputy President, Acting Deputy President, the Turnbull Coalition government is leading the way on trains. Doesn't just stop there either. It was just at the start of this month, 9 months after the federal budget announcement to commit $100 million for the North East line, that the Victorian Andrews Labor government sought to derail the whole project. That is an unintentional pun, but yes, the Andrews Labor government did seek to derail the whole project. Acting Deputy President, it is very hard to believe, but Premier Andrews of Victoria decided that North East was not in fact his priority, and it wasn't the state's job to fund regional rail upgrades. However, I am particularly proud, very proud, to enlighten the chamber of the knowledge that once again the Turnbull Coalition government has stepped in to save the day in my home state of Victoria. Just last week, the Coalition put forward another $135 million for the North East line. We have over doubled our funding to make these upgrades a reality. But where is the state Labor government when all of this is happening, I hear you ask? Well, Acting Deputy President, the Victorian Andrews Labor government is running for cover as the Victorian Coalition opposition announced $633 million for country rail in Victoria if they are elected at the November state election. And this is well over the $500 million committed to replace the ageing diesel-hauled trains with 16 new generation Velocity trains. The Coalition is giving passengers comfort, it's giving them legroom, it's giving them safety and amenity while travelling across the state on 96 new rail cars capable of travelling at up to 160 kilometres an hour. Now, Acting Deputy President, I know this is hard to believe, but the Turnbull Coalition government's commitment to rail for all of Australia doesn't stop there. In fact, the rail line doesn't just end up in Wodonga, it doesn't end in Wagga Wagga. It certainly won't cease in Narrabri. Acting Deputy President, that's because the Turnbull Coalition government in the 2017-18 budget committed $10 billion towards a national rail program, which includes $8.4 billion for the Inland Rail project stretching from Melbourne to Brisbane. Now, Inland Rail is a once-in-a-generation nation-building infrastructure project. It will give people in regional areas the capacity to be part of a corridor of commerce with greater access to and from regional markets and improved linkages with the national freight network. We are getting on with the job. On the 15th of January this year, I attended the first steel rail delivery from the Parks to Narromine project. The Victorian government signed a bilateral agreement to support Inland Rail on Friday, the 16th of March 2018, and after years and years of talking, construction will finally start in May this year. Inland Rail comprises 13 projects across Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, and study corridors for each of the 13 Inland Rail projects have already been identified. Construction on all sections is expected to be underway by early 2021. The railway is expected to commence operations in 2024 and 25. Acting Deputy President, while we have been very busy in the Coalition making things actually happen, the Andrews Labor government in Victoria have made themselves busy by complaining incessantly about a lack of support from the federal government. Now, while I am normally in support of anyone requesting more help from my great home state of Victoria, Premier Daniel Andrews is betraying the trust of the Victorian people with this gripe. For this government has pledged billions of dollars in matched funding that Premier Andrews is yet to realise, and it's time he came clean with the Victorian people. The Turnbull government has allocated $3 billion for infrastructure in Victoria since April 2016, supporting 48 separate projects across Melbourne and across regional Victoria. Now, the vast majority of these projects need to be rolled out by the Andrews government. They are funded by the federal government, but they need the Andrews government to step up and support them. They need the Andrews government to step up and roll them out. But disappointingly, of these 48 projects, only 3 have been completed and only 10 are under construction. And yet the constant gripe from Daniel Andrews is that the federal government has overlooked Victoria time and time again. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's now up to Premier Andrews to unlock the funds that have been allocated to Victoria. The Andrews Labor government has clearly failed in its duty to put the Commonwealth funding that has been allocated to it to work. The Turnbull government's commitment include unlocking $1.5 billion previously allocated to the East-West link to support upgrades on the Monash Freeway, that was $500 million, the M80 Ring Road, that was $350 million, the Murray Basin project, which was $220 million plus a further $20 million as part of the Victorian Regional Rail Package, the Regional and Rural Roads Package, which was $345 million, and the Urban Congestion Package, which was originally $75 million but was increased to $85 million following the Victorian government's refusal of $10 million to help plan the Melbourne Metro. And I heard Senator Ketter mention that very project just a few minutes ago. And the Turnbull government's $1.4 billion Victorian Regional Rail Package, announced in June 2017, was allocated towards upgrades on the Ballarat line, that's $502 million, the Gippsland line, including the Avon River Bridge upgrade, that's another $502 million, the Warrnambool line, so important in one of our most prolific agricultural areas, $104 million. The Geelong line, which Geelong is essentially now a commuter town to Melbourne, that's $99 million. The North East line, as we mentioned earlier, that was $100 million. The Bendigo and Echuca lines, that's $82 million. And the Shepparton line, another $9 million. Now, these are critical regional rail upgrades, and they are being held up by the Andrews Labor government in Victoria, which is yet to provide adequate detail on most of the projects and to deliver the commitments needed to get the landmark inland rail project moving. It was also the Turnbull government that initiated the development of a business case for the Melbourne Airport rail link through a $30 million investment in the 2017-18 federal budget. And Victorians should not for a second be fooled by Premier Andrews' attempt to take credit for that project in November. The Andrews Labor government never stops asking for more money from Canberra, but it needs to get on with the desperately needed road and rail projects that the Turnbull government has already committed to help fund. And that is why Victorians are stuck in traffic. That's why they have a right to expect what this Turnbull government wants to see happen as quickly as possible. There is an estimated $5.6 billion waiting to be spent on Victorian infrastructure if the Turnbull government's $3 billion commitment to the East-West link is included. Victorians have a right to be sceptical that the Andrews Labor government is deliberately stalling projects in key marginal electorates so that works commence on the eve of the November state polls and giving an illusion of delivery before people head to those polls. It's not surprising that local communities waiting for much-needed road and rail upgrades remain angered and frustrated that one of the biggest infrastructure spends by the Andrews government so far has been, wait for it, the $1.3 billion that it spent cancelling an infrastructure project, cancelling the East-West link. It becomes all too easy to understand the frustration of Victorians. It becomes all too easy to understand that they pull their hair out when they are stuck in traffic, when they're waiting on rail lines for trains that don't arrive, when the trains that do arrive break down because their rolling stock is in such extraordinary poor quality, when V-line services running from Melbourne to Geelong, a basic commuter town, are either late or so overcrowded that you can't even fit passengers on. It's got to the stage now where our Victorian V-line trains are like the Japanese subway, where people have to be pushed on. These are very long commutes, and it's entirely unreasonable that a country like ours should expect that sort of capacity from its rail network. So you understand, Acting Deputy President, the government's hesitation, not just in bipartisan initiation of these projects, but the implementation. Federal Labor cannot, in all seriousness, ask for a federal coalition support on a project such as this without evidence and commitment that it can hold its state counterparts to account after the negligent mismanagement of projects that the coalition have earnestly and in good faith supported and initiated in the past. And it's time now for the Andrews government to step up and deliver on the promises that it has made to the Victorian people.